a freak.
It's a dire wolf.
One of the most iconic Ice Age beasts often taken for granted are the dire wolves. Tens of thousands of bones of these large canines have been recovered from all over North America, from the tar pits of LA to the quaternary deposits of Bolivia. They've been a part of Ice Age paleoart since their discovery, and have made their way into the realm of fantasy with their appearance in HBO's Game of Thrones. A new study, fresh off the digital press, has made a startling discovery in the preserved DNA of these robust carnivores. They're not wolves at all, but rather an ancient lineage of dogs that first evolved in North America, many millions of years before wolves even got here. Animations in this video were provided by the Roblox project Cenozoic Survival. They modeled their dire wolf off of the old information as well as the new information to create a more balanced look for the creature. Please check out their game in the description and comments section. The first remains of what would go on to be called the dire wolf were found in the 1850s. The first specimen was a jaw with cheek teeth still embedded in the bone from Indiana. Dozens more specimens would be found and named in the half-century that followed. It wasn't until the 1910s that the dire wolf remains coming out of the La Brea tar pits of Los Angeles showed that all previous finds were of the same type of animal. After some years of figuring things out, dotting I's, crossing T's, and comparing the bones of all specimens, it was generally agreed that there was one major species of extinct large wolf, Canis dirus. The La Brea tar pits asphalt seeps are well known to many and provide breathtaking fossil cache snapshots of what life was like in North America 10,000 plus years ago. The tar-preserved remains of these canines revealed a critter that was essentially a beefed-up wolf. The bones are nearly identical on a first glance, but there are two big differences. The subtler one is that the overall body size is slightly larger than the gray wolf, the more obvious one being that the skull is a bit larger but quite a bit more robust than the wolf. It's long been assumed the heavy skull was an adaptation to tackle the megafauna of the time, like mammoths, bison, camels, and horses. In the 110 years since this coalescence of dire wolf research, many thousands more fossils have been found to add to the library of big bad wolf bones. It was also long assumed these wolves crossed over the land and ice bridge connecting Eurasia and North America thousands of years before the gray wolves made their way across, owing to the dire wolf's unique adaptations. Yet, a lot about them still remained a mystery. Some well-preserved DNA extracted from a handful of dire wolf bones are changing what was known about these animals beyond anyone's wildest imaginations. Enter Dr. Angela Perry and her team. Dr. Angela Perry is an archaeologist with primary interests in zooarchaeology and paleoparasitology. Her research primarily focuses on the nature of human-environment interactions by analyzing early relationships between humans and animals. Dr. Perry, as lead author, was joined by 48 other researchers on the new groundbreaking dire wolf paper published January 13, 2021. The study began as an effort to get a better understanding of dire wolf basics. According to Dr. Perry, it started more as a US road trip to see if any DNA could be found in dire wolf bones across the country. Co-author and geneticist Dr. Kieran Mitchell of the University of Adelaide, Australia, was doing the same thing. Over time, more labs from around the world joined in on the project since they were all working on the same problem, thus the super long author list. One of the bigger questions posited by the research team was exactly how related dire wolves were to other species of wolves, particularly gray wolves and their coyote and dhole cousins. It's easy to see how the dire wolf and the gray wolf are difficult to tell apart, as their bones are extremely similar. Dr. Mitchell was under the suspicion the dire wolf may have been a specialized lineage or subspecies of the gray wolf. As the study progressed, the evidence told a far stranger story. The study's preliminary genetic analyses suggest dire and gray wolves are distantly related. Surprise, the image of the upsized gray wolf of the Ice Age is no more. Meet the new dire wolf, or should I say the old dire wolf? Dr. Perry and her team were only able to find DNA good enough for analysis in 5 direwolf specimens, ranging from 50,000 to 13,000 years old.
Tar isn't exactly the greatest thing to help preserve ancient DNA. Stable isotope analysis has worked on some of the material from there, but we're still working on the possibility. We've looked at trying to preserve DNA or extract DNA from some of the material from La Brea, and it just hasn't worked. Fighting against the tar has been a little bit too difficult, but really great for looking at the morphology of the animals.
They sequenced the genomes of these individuals. These genomes told the researchers these canines were separated by almost 6 million years of evolutionary time. The dire wolf actually belongs to a much older lineage of doggos. The dire wolf is now considered to have evolved in the Americas without a close kinship with the gray wolves of Eurasia. This means that, like the similarities between the bones of thylacines and wolves, the similarities between the dire and gray wolf can be chalked up to convergent evolution. By that, I mean 2 separate lineages of animals independently evolved similar traits due to similar pressures over deep time. You can see this illustrated perfectly in the smooth skin and torpedo shape of dolphins, sharks, and the extinct ichthyosaurs, or the croc shape which appears in the phytosaurs, the temnospondyl amphibians, the early primitive whales, and of course, true crocs. This sort of thing has happened millions of times throughout the history of life on Earth. This has even further reaching implications than just the genetics of the dire wolf. Due to the assumed close evolutionary kinship between the wolves, paleontologists have taken the gray wolf as a good proxy for what the dire wolf looked like, acted like, and how it lived. Now that the gray wolf's proxy position has been revoked, the actual biology of the dire wolf is up in the air. Clearly, 6 million years of separation means the dire wolf's pack dynamics, sounds, mating behaviors, colors, and fur could not have been super similar to the gray wolf. Previous assumptions need to be thrown out, which should prompt a ton of papers and research regarding these puppers' true appearance. This new research might even mean the dire wolf can no longer have the canis card. It's suggested to belong to its own unique genus, Enocyon, meaning terrible wolf. This means it probably occupied a space on the dog family tree similar to the maned wolf. The maned wolf is the last surviving member of its own genus, which stands apart from the others by means of millions of years of evolution. Learn more about this heckin' leggy boy in my own video about it here. All of this won't mean we have to call it something different. It's still a dire wolf. This means Game of Thrones got it very wrong. Of course, how could they have known the real dire wolf wasn't actually a wolf, given how fresh this discovery is? Their only real mistake was making their dire wolves monstrously large. They vary in size throughout the series due to individual variation, like in Ghost, or due to age.
No. Goes away. Shoot. Shoot!
I'm not super well versed in the extensive book lore, but I did watch all of the show up to season 7, so I know that Ghost is clearly the smallest of the adult direwolves that appear in the show. The largest, though, reaches the dimensions of a horse or rhino, which is plainly ridiculous. Then again, it's a fantasy show, so where am I to complain? Still looks cool, though. The new genetic findings also provide more evidence as to why they went extinct. The direwolves disappeared at the end of the last glacial maximum, the Ice Age, 12 to 11,540 years ago, probably due to a load of reasons I won't begin to cover in this video, but the one the researchers targeted was the extinction of the herbivorous megafauna. Since the dire wolf was more equipped to handle larger prey items, like ground sloths, mammoths, mastodons, horses, and bison, Their populations dried up along with those of their prey. Grey wolves, on the other paw, are a model of adaptability. They were able to survive the extinction of megafaunal herbivores by already having a varied diet. The dire wolves also didn't leave a genetic legacy. They were simply the last of their kind. Coyotes and wolves easily hybridized into coy wolves, but there's exactly zero evidence in the DNA Dr. Perry and her teams analyzed that the dire wolf ever got frisky with the other American canines. There's also exactly zero DNA of the dire wolf in any of the modern canine genomes. This means that dire wolves were too genetically distinct from other canines to be able to produce viable offspring. Hybridization didn't give them a lifeline for survival, and they petered out. By the end of the last ice age, the dire wolves were facing dramatic extinction. The adaptability of the grey wolves, having evolved in the harsher, more variable environments of Eurasia, possibly gave them an edge over their hulking, dire competitors. One of the reasons coyotes and wolves may have survived the Pleistocene megafaunal extinction is their ability to hybridize and to mix up their DNA as the environment sees fit. They are extremely variable and can interbreed with one another and with dogs, and their diets can include just about anything from plants to insects to small mammals and large ungulates. This may have also saved the coyotes and wolves from the diseases being brought into North America from South America and the Old World, something the dire wolves couldn't do. The range of the dire wolves, according to Dr. Perry, continued to shrink with the last vestiges of the critters finding refuge in the North American Southwest. In a great interview with Mark from Evolution Soup, Dr. Perry discussed the possibility of dire wolf and human interactions.
What we know from our recent research is that the dates that we have some kind of later dates on old remains dating from the 80s and 90s, which is a little bit questionable because we have new dating techniques which were more reliable as far as radiocarbon dating. The date that we have in our new paper, we believe is probably the most reliable latest date, and that dates to around 12,900 years ago. So that would be about the latest date. Directly dated material that we have for dire wolves, and that we know in that time period that we definitely had humans in the Americas, that people were probably coming into the Americas at least by 16,000 years ago. So we definitely have an overlap in the time periods of the peopling of the Americas and dire wolves living still in the Americas. So we can assume that at some point some humans likely came across dire wolves, and they may have had some interaction. Unclear still what that would have looked like and how that would have happened, where, things like that. Some of the other sites that I work on, in particular, there are a handful of sites in the Southwest, in Arizona, New Mexico region, where we do have evidence of dire wolves at anthropogenic sites. So we have human archaeological material at the same time period where we have dire wolf material. There are only a handful of sites where we have both evidence for humans and dire wolves in the same location. And my research now is kind of ongoing, looking at, is this interaction real? Did the humans at that site have a potential kind of hunting interaction? Were they killing dire wolves? What did that interaction look like? The material from those sites is really interesting because it tends to be much smaller than the average dire wolf that we know about. So what does that mean? It can mean a number of things. It could mean that in the Southwest you have essentially an ecomorph, which is a kind of local variation of dire wolves that were just smaller than others. We know that we have at least two subspecies of dire wolves. We have a kind of western species of dire wolf that tends to be slightly smaller than the more eastern version of dire wolves. So it's possible that there's this kind of southwestern version of a dire wolf that just tends to be smaller.
The geographical variation Dr. Perry references was recognized in a 1984 study by Dr. Bjorn Kurten, a Finnish paleontologist known for his research of human evolution. In that study, Dr. Kurten named two subspecies of the wolf, Canis dirus dirus and Canis dirus gildei. Gildei was the morph found in California and Mexico, while the dirus dirus morph was found east of the North American continental divide. The southwestern subspecies had shorter limbs and longer teeth, while the eastern subspecies had the opposite. What this would have meant for their outer differences is unknown, but the team at Cenozoic Survival have given their dirus dirus a darker coloration to their gildei. It's just speculation, but you never know. The same sites where these last surviving southwestern dire wolves are found are the sites where evidence of human and dire wolf interactions might also be found, as Dr. Perry notes.
These are Clovis period sites, so these are much later even than the 13,000 year old dire wolf that we identified. So it's a potential that these dire wolves at these sites are kind of the last gasps of the dire wolf population, and that they are surviving from scavenging off of human remains and human kills, that they're using the Southwest as a bit of a refuge, and they're kind of in their last unfortunate gasps of their population surviving. The kind of extreme idea would be that is there a potential that these dire wolves are having some kind of commensal relationship with humans in this region. Are humans allowing them to scavenge their kills? Are humans getting closer to them? Do humans have some sort of domestic relationship with these animals? That's probably the extreme possibility, but again, humans did it with wolves, and so it could be possible that they did it with dire wolves. That's something that we would like to look at in the future.
So what would they have looked like? Well, that has yet to be answered. Follow-up studies are needed to get a better idea of how their outside was different from the wolves their bones resemble. In the meantime, many different paleoartists have taken different routes to reach their possible Enoseon dirus. One of my favorite prolific paleoartists is Hodari Nundu. He's known for his use of a smudgy pastel-like style and bringing to life scenarios or ideas no one else has come up with. There has yet to be an extensive study as to what the true closest relatives are for the dire wolf, and whether it belongs in its own family or if it might belong to an already known one. The new study was able to whittle down the dire wolf as more closely related to jackals and South American canines rather than wolves and dogs. As such, Hodari and others have given the dire wolf some characteristics which branched off from the canine tree early on in its evolution, what paleontologists call basal characteristics. His first Enoseon piece takes inspiration from South American canids, to which there might be some relation to the dire wolf. He's given it oval-shaped pupils, which are seen in gray foxes and bush dogs, but not in true wolves. Hodari also gave this critter shorter, less dense fur, since it wasn't a beast of the tundra. Instead, they were more adapted to temperate climates. This reconstruction is topped off with a more hyena-like build, due to the huge head and powerful jaws and teeth. With all this said, this reconstruction is probably more towards the implausible end of the spectrum. Hodari then made a few more dire wolf pieces more recently that are perhaps more plausible. These two show a dire wolf with a coat of browns, blacks, and reds, a short mane like the maned wolf, and gray and white face markings similar to the gray wolf or jackal. Dr. Perry had a lot to say about the mysterious nature of the true appearance of the dire wolf.
It's always hard to say what an extinct creature would look like if we saw it in the flesh. We assume kind of most standard recreations of a dire wolf looks a lot like what we would think of as a modern kind of Arctic timber wolf, but a bit larger and a bit more robust. So we know from the skeleton of the dire wolves that we do have that they were on average a bit bigger than the average gray wolf. They were maybe about 150 pounds. We do know that their kind of skeletal morphology is definitely a bit more robust. kind of broader, thicker limbs than the average gray wolf. But they do seem to be roughly about the same size as some of our biggest kind of Arctic timber wolves. So we tend to think of a dire wolf as this kind of giant megafauna, big, huge wolf, but probably not that much bigger than some of our biggest wolves now. They do have more robust kind of dental morphology, so a bit bigger teeth, more designed for bringing down the kind of larger megafauna like mammoth, mastodon, horses, things like that they were living with in the Pleistocene of the Americas. So in that sense, they did tend to be kind of a bigger, more robust version of a gray wolf. It is possible from our new work that the dire wolves potentially gave rise in South America. So it is possible, although we have this vision of gray wolf or dire wolves as this kind of very furry timber wolf looking animal, that it may look a bit more like a warm adapted canine. So potentially something like a hyena or a jackal that has a bit shorter coat, kind of smaller ears, things like that. Something more like an African canid. So that's something that we're hoping to do more work on in the future, is kind of figure out what is the look of a dire wolf.
The art used for the articles on this new study was made by well-known paleoartist Mauricio Anton. He has taken more cues from dogs like dholes, dingoes, simian wolves, and maned wolves. He mainly took inspiration from these canines for the pelt of his dire wolf. We're basically looking at a fox jackal software running on wolf hardware. In Mauricio's latest piece, he's shown a confrontation between a pack of dire wolves and a pack of greys. You can pretty readily see the size and muscular differences between the two. For now, it's mildly speculative, but it won't be forever. The story of the dire wolf is far from over. Preserved genes of the dire wolf show that they were the top dogs in the Americas for millions of years before the end of the Ice Age. The answer of exactly how they got to that stature is waiting to be found. Make sure you like this video and share it around. Leave a comment if you like, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon too if you want to stay in the know with everything Edge. Thanks for watching. Pledge to my Patreon at any tier you like for a slew of many delicious offerings. Special thanks to patrons Dinosaur, Nattycat, Steve Bradshaw, Thea Svensson, Arda Bayer, Ray M, Dana Manchester, Aphid, Kirby, and Chris Frampton.